Hello, I'm Ade Molajo. Some of you may know me as a Web3 and AI ecosystem builder. I've recorded about 10 episodes of my podcast right now, where I interview some of the brightest minds in the space about what career success means to them and how they got to where they are today, in a bid to provide some advice for anyone who's just thinking about getting into the AI and Web3 space, or anyone who's already in the space and is looking to level up their career. But one thing that actually dawned to me is I haven't spoken much about myself and what I do as an ecosystem builder. So here it goes. A reintroduction to Ade Molajo, if you will. As an ecosystem builder, I do a number of things, one of which is managing a grants program or a bounty program. I also manage an ecosystem fund. I do business development, and I also run a podcast, of course. Let's take these one at a time. A bounty program or a grants program is a way of providing funding for very early stage projects, and these are ecosystem specific. When I say ecosystem dependent, I mean these could be ecosystems like Ethereum, Hedera, Polygon, you get the drift. So it's about providing funding to early stage projects for these networks to help the networks grow. Without funding, you don't have projects, meaning you don't have dApps which users can fall in love with and help grow the network. So you need a way to fund these projects, and that's where the grants program comes in. I also run an ecosystem fund. Now, an ecosystem fund you can think of as very much of a startup venture capital fund. But again, this is ecosystem specific, as the title would make you assume. Running an ecosystem fund, you're not dealing with very early stage projects like you would a grants program or a bounty program, but you're looking at projects which have already found product market fit and are now looking to step into the next stage of their growth as fully fledged companies. And this is where I come in as an ecosystem fund manager. I do diligence on projects that match the funding criteria and then disperse funding. As a business development manager, it's my job to foster new partnerships, either through outreach, going out and speaking to projects, or through inbound leads, where we put out some marketing, and then based on qualified leads, we reel in the partnerships and solidify them. And of course, lastly, I run this podcast. For this session, I'll be doing a deep dive into a day in the life of a grants program manager. So from the top, what is a grants program? You can think of a grants program as an investment fund, except you're not asking for equity in return for the investments that are made. These are equity-free investments into projects to help them grow. Even though they're equity-free, projects still have to meet the criteria to be dispersed these grants. And normally these are laid out in a number of milestones that have to be met before the grants are issued. In other words, a project is awarded a grant and then they go ahead to complete milestones. After milestone 1, one portion of the grants is dispersed. After milestone 2, one portion of the grants is dispersed again. And depending on the number of milestones, because this could be normally anything from 1 milestone to 6 milestones, the project will get the grant amount that was promised to them at the start. What is a grants manager? Well, a grants manager is someone who takes care of a grants program. It's someone who owns a grants program. One of the things they do is to raise awareness of a grants program. If no one knows that a grants program is available, then the network isn't going to grow. And this is done by working with 2 teams very closely. One of the teams a grants program manager works with very closely is a marketing team. They help to write blog posts, to put out tweets, as well as set up webinars, all in the name of raising awareness for a grants program. The other team that a grants program manager works with very closely is a development team. The development team will work with the grants program manager to build out RFPs, requests for proposals. These could be requests for everything from in the very early stage days of a network, from infrastructure such as oracles and indexes and centralized exchanges, to things that a much more mature network will be looking for, such as DEXs, gaming projects, and even NFTs. In a nutshell, you can think of grants program managers as project managers for a grants program. On first look, it may look like a very solitary job, but actually, a grants program manager requires very good people skills in order to work with such a diverse set of teams. And this will invariably dictate how successful the grants program is. How does one become a grants program manager? Now, these roles are very few and far between because, as you may have guessed, you probably only need one grants program manager for a grants program. For me, I've always had an interest in working with early stage projects because I see them as being very innovative and pushing the boundaries, doing things that projects which are much later in their journey just don't have the capacity to do, because early stage projects can pivot very quickly, being a function of how nimble they are. Of course, it helps to have worked in venture capital, but if you're not lucky enough to have had a job in the space, then the 3 books I would recommend you reading: number 1, The Startup Game by William Draper. Number 2 is Venture Deals by Brad Feld. And number 3 is Break into VC by Bradley Miles. To get hands-on experience in working with startups, you can volunteer at a local accelerator program. Depending on the part of the world you live, as well as whether you're in a big city or not, these should be very easy to come by. A quick search in a website like Meetups should show you a list of the startup accelerators in your city. And lastly, it helps to have an interest in Web3 if Web3 grants program management is something that you're interested in. Do you work in Web3? Are you thinking about moving into the Web3 space and working as a grants program manager? Have I missed anything that you would like me to cover? Comment below, and I'll be sure to do a follow-on video where I tackle some of these subjects.